So hello everyone, my name is Ajmain Yamin, and I am the president of Math Club. Today we are having a career panel with some professionals who have studied math in their undergraduate career. So the structure of this panel is going to be 60 minutes long. And so I ask that everyone who is a participant to keep their microphone muted and their video off. We'll be taking questions in the chat, and our Vice President, Julian, will voice those questions at the appropriate time. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's go off to our panelists. If each of you could introduce yourselves, where you work, what you do, and mention your undergraduate or graduate math background, depending, that would be great. So anyone can volunteer to go first and introduce yourselves.
I can start. Hi, everybody. My name is Ben. Currently, I work at Google, based out of Mountain View, California. I studied math and physics as a double major in undergraduate at a school called Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. And then I did my PhD at Stony Brook in math. I chose to go to Stony Brook because I wanted to study something at the intersection of math and physics, and it seemed like a good place. I ended up doing my research in general relativity. My advisor was Marcus Curry. I don't know if some of you know him. I graduated in 2019, so pretty recently. And since then, I've been a software engineer at Google. And so it's a pretty big switch from what I was doing. I can tell you more about that if you're interested. But right now, I work on a product called Google Analytics. So it's an ads product that websites and apps use to track the traffic on their website or their app. So the number of users, what types of users, and they can make ads decisions or just other kinds of design decisions based off of that. So I mostly work on the data processing side of that. So we write a lot of code in C++ to try and make sure that customers' data gets processed efficiently and correctly. And yeah, that's what I do in my data.
Great. I can go next if I don't know. Hi, my name is Joseph. So I studied math in undergraduate at Vanderbilt University, and then also came to Stony Brook to complete a PhD in pure math. So I studied differential geometry with Claude Lebrun. My thesis was on quaternion Kähler manifolds and some sort of related geometry. Let's see, I finished that in the when was that? August 2018, I guess. So after that, starting in early 2019, I began working at Goldman Sachs, where I am an associate in the private wealth management division. Let's see. So I mostly work on, it's also kind of a software engineering job, I suppose, where I work to build trading tools that portfolio managers who manage an options strategy that certain, it's private wealth management, so generally high net worth individual clients who like to have the strategy. So I build tools that the portfolio managers use to help them make those trades, understand the risks of those portfolios, and run that strategy.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. So hi, I'm Olga. I am actually a recent graduate of Stony Brook. I actually just graduated this past May. And I am currently working for Citigroup in their markets division. So recently started and I interned there this past summer, and I was hired as a quantitative analyst. I majored in economics and applied math at Stony Brook, and then I minored in pure math and computer science. And so I was hired as a quant, which is basically what those roles are people that execute, create algorithms for trading. So on the trading floor, You have a bunch of people like in a bunch of trades going through, and they write the algorithms to make those trades happen. But I got placed into the research division on the US Credit IG desk. And what we basically do is we have a bunch of clients, hedge funds, pension funds, and we publish research for them about the US investment grade credit market. So that's just basically when companies issue bonds in US dollars, so it's just debt. And we publish a bunch of research on that, answer client requests. And a lot of that work is involved using Python and very large databases. Since there's so many bonds outstanding out there, the databases are very large. And so you end up just writing a lot of Python code and doing a lot of math to be able to create the research that the clients want.
Hi guys, my name is Austin. I'm a first-year grad student, physics grad student at the University of Michigan. I majored in physics and math at Stony Brook. And before actually coming to grad school, I actually spent some time at American Express, where I worked in a AI research team. And basically we read a lot of papers and implemented whatever the boss thought was going to be business applicable. But yeah.
I could go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Liam Heath. I just graduated from Stony Brook in 2019. I studied applied math and economics there. Currently, I work for a company called Broadridge. So I started in July of 2019. I spent 8 months in a management development program there. And currently, I'm a software engineer on a relatively new team at Broadridge, specifically focusing on AI and machine learning technologies. So I'm on a project right now that is utilizing natural language processing to extract relevant call data points from various documents from the business that we get from the SEC. So things like different meeting locations, meeting times, just going through the documents. They're like 50 pages long and no one wants to read. So we get that key information out and put it into a nice format for our users.
Okay, thanks so much for introducing yourselves. So the first question I have is, how did you choose which career field to pursue? Was it because of the classes you took, or did you choose it based on your work experiences, or both?
I can go first again. So for me, it was mostly just wanting to try something different. I think I had a lot of experience with math and with physics in undergrad and grad school, but hadn't had the opportunity to touch computer science much. And I think that seemed like an area where, one, I would benefit a lot from learning more, and two, that there were a lot of open, interesting problems to be solved, and also a lot of jobs. So I think it was mostly, hey, I think I can learn this and be good at this. It seems like it would be fun. So let me try this out and see how it goes. So it was kind of an experiment for me. And so far it's going pretty well.
Sure, I can maybe go next. We'll just stick with the same order, perhaps. So I'm in finance now. That was not initially the plan. So I did go to graduate school initially with the intention of becoming a professor and doing pure mathematics. And after some time spent actually doing that, realized that probably wasn't the best path for me. So after that, began to explore other options. And in particular, something that I liked a lot about finance was that it was a place where I thought you could engage a lot of the same types of thinking that you have in pure mathematics, of sort of thinking through generating hypotheses generating like axioms and sort of trying to think through what would follow from this and understand understand the consequences of some set of rules and definitions and kind of really understand the patterns in that. And I think there's a very similar type of thinking that you can engage in finance. Certainly, much different in that it's not kind of the beauty of pure math. It's the real world. But I think you still get to sort of flex some of those same muscles, and so that's one of the things that drew me to that.
Yeah, I guess since we're sticking in the same order, I more or less planned on going into finance. At least I wanted to try to get into the financial services industry after college, and I'm not sure if I will stick with that in the future. Generally, I just see like when I was looking at potential career paths, I wanted something like I really enjoyed math and I really enjoy working with data and like having real world applications. So I thought that finance would be a good experience in order to like get those skills and just be very much exposed to the real world. But I'm not sure if I'll be sticking with it in the future. But it was like a plan, and I picked my courses along the way while at Stony Brook in order to kind of shape what would be attractive on the job market.
Well, similar to what everybody else said, basically, the job market is certainly a major consideration. But, I double majored in physics and math, and I had taken, some simulations course at one point in time that I thought was really interesting. And I saw some interesting papers applying sort of AI to physics problems, and that really got me sort of into the AI world, or really interested in it. And I got a few internships, and eventually that's how I landed my job at American Express. And, the plan for me was always to go to grad school, but I took a bit of a year off to just sort of prepare applications and whatnot. And one thing I noticed that, I did work on a research team, so it's a little bit biased, but, 60% of my team, I mean, we were a small team, they all had PhDs. So, going into sort of industry research, it's certainly they do, or at least in my biased experience, like PhDs. And I definitely enjoy research anyway. So I came back, I gladly left my job to make a third the income and work really hard to get a PhD, which is why I'm here now.
So at Stony Brook, I actually was planning on becoming an actuary, and I formed my coursework around that because at the time I didn't really have much of a desire to go to graduate school. So I felt becoming an actuary was a pretty natural progression of a math and economics major. But like junior year, I'd say, I discovered it really wasn't for me. And I got an internship at the company I'm at now did some software development work, and I really enjoyed that. And I was sort of, as a hobby, teaching myself to code more, separate from the classes I took at Stony Brook, and got really into the data science. And so after I finished the management program, I was really lucky to end up in a data science-like role. So it wasn't necessarily exactly what I set out to do in school, but definitely my coursework, I'd say, prepared me well, at least the critical thinking and logical reasoning for the role I have currently.
So that brings me to another question. So if you are a Stony Brook alum, what courses or areas of study would you recommend for students to enroll in if they're interested in working in the same field as you?
I'm going to mostly punt this question because I was just like Joe doing a pure math PhD. So I think a lot of the courses are not really directly applicable to anything that I do right now. But I think, like everyone has been saying, the kind of muscles that you build just from taking pure math courses and thinking logically and stuff like that are very helpful just in building that kind of a framework in your head. But I think probably you should talk to someone that actually took some more comp sci related courses.
Yeah, I might kind of, with a similar background, sort of make a similar punt. The one thing I would note is that I don't think it's an accident that everyone here who studied math has ended up in a job where they're doing a lot of programming. And so even if you are in the pure math department at Stony Brook and working towards that goal, you would, I think, be very well served to be taking some, whether you're taking classes in computer science or also learning some programming on your own. That's more the approach that I took to end up at my job. But you definitely should. I think very many careers, you're going to want to have that experience of programming experience to be able to enter mathematical careers even with a pure math background.
Okay, I guess I might be a little better equipped to answer this question since I graduated so recently. I would say there's a lot of courses, especially if you're an applied math major, if you're interested in finance, that are very useful. There's a financial math course that I took. I think it's 318, which is basically a bunch of bond math. And if you ever want to go into trading or do anything in terms of markets, that's a very, very useful class. I think it's more based for like actuarial studies, but it's also very, very useful just like if you choose to work in the financial services industry. There's another course in the AMS department, I believe it's 394, that teaches you a bit of, I think it's R. There's a lot of R in that class, which is very helpful. And basically anything in any course where you can do, like I found when I was interviewing for desks this past summer, anywhere where you can do Python and work with large data sets is going to be very helpful, at least in my experience. And then anywhere where you get to just analyze, I took a bunch of econ classes and those are really nice. It's like you have like questions. It's like, what does the data tell me? Like I'm looking at this chart, like how do I make sense of this? And thinking and looking at things a little bit of more of an open mind. So I feel like it's like technical skills, but then also being able to think about things, like when you're presented with some sort of information, be able to digest and understand it and be able to speak about it as well.
Thank you so much.
I didn't take a lot of sort of computer science classes at Stony Brook. Actually, there's that one computational physics class, I think, that's required for physics majors. And I think that's what I took. But I would recommend, I didn't take this course, but I did work through the book in preparations for my interviews, the analysis of algorithms course. It's always good to know those algorithms, sort of, especially for interviews where you're like explicitly going to be asked to sort of talk about them. But again, since you're all math majors or whatever, you're gonna see a lot of familiar concepts come out of it. You just sort of need to be aware of the terminology that's used in your interviews and sort of how to think at that level when you're working through code problems. But it's certainly not necessary for you to go through the course or the book. You can do it on your own time, but it is helpful for sure if you're like forcing yourself to do it.
Yeah, I echo what Olga said. I really recommend AMS 394, which I think it taught R and SAS as well, more R than SAS. I'd also recommend two courses. I don't know if they're offered currently. It's Introduction to Quantitative Finance and Introduction to Time Series Analysis, taught by the same professor. They're not super applicable to my job now in a content sense, but I thought they were really helpful in just teaching me, just really building up that critical reasoning and the logic and really helping me think more, if that makes sense. And they were enjoyable classes. I'd also recommend taking, maybe if you're interested, like an introductory computer science course. I think you have to do that for AMS. I don't know for MAT, but I only took two courses, computer science courses at Stony Brook, CSE 101, and I took Introduction to Programming in C. CSE 101 was helpful for the Python. I wouldn't say Introduction to Programming in C was super helpful in the long term, but I think having that base introduction class was great, and it set a good groundwork for more self-teaching further on.
We have a question from someone in the audience. They said, I'm currently a TA for AMS 318 and planning to take both the P and FM exam within the next 6 months. Are there any recommendations for what companies are great starter companies for beginner actuaries?
I could answer this. I could answer actuarial questions. I was the president of the actuary club at Stony Brook for a year or two. So I'd recommend going to ASNY, ASNY. I don't know if they're doing it over Zoom or it can't be in person right now, but it's a great opportunity it's like speed dating interviews, sort of. You go up and you give your resume and you talk to them. There's a lot of people there. But there's good companies like MetLife, New York Life. I look into the life insurance companies if you want to go that route. There's also property and casualty companies you could look into. But I know MetLife is very good to their beginner employees. Generally look for companies that offer like the actuarial assistant roles, and look for if they offer time off for testing or compensation for the cost of tests or even training materials. So I'd recommend for looking at that on the application pages for actuarial assistant or actuarial analyst roles.
Okay. So now I want to ask, how does math play into your everyday work tasks and responsibilities? So we know that math is really important. How does it play into your work?
So I guess the area of computer science that my group most closely resembles is a thing called distributed systems. So a lot of my work is just dealing with a lot of big pieces and figuring out the right way to put them together. So I don't know exactly what area of math you would relate it to. There's probably some graph theory in there. There's definitely some like data analysis in there. But it's a lot of, I guess, like systems thinking and trying to organize things efficiently and well. And so, yeah, and I guess there's also a significant portion of my work is trying to find efficient ways to write C++ code. So whenever you need to process huge amounts of data, a lot of the times it's better to do it in a lower level language like C++, and you need to think about ways to do that efficiently. And so Google has a lot of tools to do that for you, but sometimes you need to kind of get down into the nitty-gritty and think more in terms of like the data structures and the algorithms that are best suited for the task at hand. And then some of my work communicates more with the front-end people on product design and product decisions. And in that case, we do a lot of data analysis in order to decide like what features should be rolled out to which customers and stuff like that. So that's more on the data analysis side. I will be honest and say that my current role doesn't use math in exactly the way that I would like. And so far, it's just given me more of like software engineering experience than direct use of mathematics. And so I'm looking for roles within Google that are more machine learning oriented, more modeling oriented. And so I'm planning on in the next 6 months or a year, switching to one of those teams because there are tons of opportunities for that at Google. And then I think it'll be more of a machine learning direct math role than what I am in right now.
Sorry. Yeah, so there's actually not, maybe in a somewhat similar way, there's not a whole ton of very hard math that I do in my sort of day-to-day work. So as I said, I work with mostly I work with a team that runs some sort of various option strategies for private wealth clients. And so, what that means is on a certain level, obviously there's some amount of financial modeling that goes into understanding those option contracts, understanding those sorts of financial products, modeling, the risks associated with those products, and thinking about if the market were to move in this way, what would the values of these portfolios look like? And there's quite a lot of difficult mathematical work that is can be done to build models for those financial products. And more generally, so I work with options, but for any kind of financial product, Olga, I believe, was speaking at a bond modeling course that she took at Stony Brook. There's all sorts of math behind modeling different financial instruments, but that might not necessarily be, even though that math is there, that's not actually something that I tend to deal with on the day-to-day, often because there are teams that have devoted, there are sort of specific teams for different financial products that kind of spend all their time working on those products. And then at least the structure at Goldman Sachs is, other teams are able to use those models and kind of understand those products for their particular uses. So my day-to-day math, definitely needs to understand and be able to be conversant in those models that are sort of generated by other people and maintained by other people. But then it's a lot more being able to take some of those things and communicate that to portfolio managers and traders and other business people who might not have the same sort of quantitative background. So it's kind of in some ways a bit of an in-between role where you maybe aren't doing the hard math stuff day to day, but you do need to have an understanding of that and a fluency with that to be able to perform sort of the other tasks that you're doing.
Okay, so I would say that my position, like, we don't do anything, I'd say, like, too math heavy. Like, there's not like a bunch of like crazy like derivatives, like calculus, etc. But we do use a lot of statistics. So like you have like a bunch of data and then you'll have to normalize it, like find like weights. Like there's all sorts of, like, they're more basic things, and you would program all, like we program all of this, but you need to understand like the basic stats behind what you're doing, and like what you're being told to do and what you're being told to calculate in order to do your job. So I'd say statistics is pretty important. No, like at least in the particular desk that I'm in, there's like no need to know like a bunch of crazy math. However, I know there's like, if you want to do options, like other desks that do options, then there's more heavier math, like a lot more derivatives, a lot more calculus, stochastic calculus, probability, and things like that. So it kind of all like depends like how much math you'll be using based on like the desk that you get placed at Citi, which makes sense. Like there's a lot of people that I work with and that I came into Citi with that have master's degrees, and I don't have one. So my math isn't quite as there as like someone who did a master's in financial engineering at Carnegie Mellon, and they know like exactly what they need to do. But regardless, like same thing is, like you'll get placed and like you need to know like the basic math in order to do your job well.
Well, I'm a grad student, so I do math all day. But at my previous job, I didn't like do math by hand at all. The most math that I sort of did was following the arguments for the papers that I had to read. But the vast majority of my time was spent implementing those papers. So if you wanted to follow those AI papers, I mean, probability is really important, and linear algebra and multivariable calculus are were basically the core of every paper. But at my position, I mean, I never really had to do, quote unquote, any of that math.
Yeah, in my role currently, I'd say the extent I do is mostly statistics, data analysis. I don't have that advanced degree, graduate degree, PhD in any sort of data science, so I'm not doing, a lot of modeling or anything like that. I mostly am more on the software engineering side. So yeah, really the extent is statistics for me.
Okay, so we have several questions from the audience. What I'm gonna do is I'll read some of like the more general questions out now, and we'll save like kind of the highly specific personal questions for the end if we have time, just because I don't want to take up all the time with these questions. So first question is, did you guys have training on the job when you got right to the company, or did they have expectations for you, like certain skills you needed to know or internship experience, or did they train you on the spot, like if you had a supervisor or something?
So the way it works at Google is, and I think at a lot of the big tech companies, is they don't expect you to have as many specific skills as you might expect. And in a lot of cases, they're just testing you for the way that you think and whether you can teach yourself to solve these coding puzzles that they give you. And then they trust that if you are smart and clever and like a hard worker, then they'll be able to onboard you to whatever they need to. So that's how it works at Google. There's a 3-week program where you're with a bunch of other new hires and they train you all together. And after those 3 weeks, you go to your specific team that you'll be working with. And on that team, you have a mentor who is in charge of giving you projects and helping you with whatever you need. So there was tons of on-the-job training that was very, very helpful.
Does anyone else want to say anything on that, or should I move to the next question? All right, so the next question I have is, what fields of math are involved in machine learning?
I guess I'll answer that. You're going to use certainly a lot of statistics because you got to really understand the data, your data set, and that's going to be all statistics. Prepping your data set, cleaning, all that stuff is going to involve statistics. Then depends what you're doing in machine learning. I mean, if you're just sort of throwing like prepackaged algorithms to your data set, you don't really need to know any of the math. You just gotta know how to use your tools. So if you're, usually that's probably gonna be Python. So certainly get your Python skills really sharp. And then if you were doing more technical stuff, if you really want to like understand how the algorithms work, and like I said before, that's going to be multivariable calculus, linear algebra. It's going to be some probability.
Okay, so now another question is, do you have any recommendations on how to get started with job searching if you're interested in finance or tech, but you don't have much work experience or projects?
I guess I can take this question. I would say in college, it's a little challenging to find like what you're interested in, and sometimes where you land may not be what you're interested in. But there's like, I know there's also a global pandemic around right now, so that's makes it a little challenging to get experiences as well. But Stony Brook does have a lot of research labs. I know like the College of Business actually has quite a few different labs like that you can join and like interview for. There's also like if you're interested in programming, there's like the VIP projects from what I remember from last year, and just a bunch of different opportunities. And while you may not narrow down exactly which field you're interested in, along the way you'll probably get some skills and you'll find, hey, I liked this, I didn't like doing this, and kind of figuring out what you find enjoyable, what you don't find enjoyable, and that will help you make better decisions in terms of your future. So I definitely recommend getting involved and just taking the opportunities that are given to you to just explore. And like, because if you don't try, you'll never really know like what you like and what you don't.
Okay, thank you. And I'll ask two more audience questions for now, and like for those of you who ask like the more specific questions, I'll try to get to those later, but I just want to not take too long. So we'll ask those at the end, like after. Yeah. So all right. So next question is, for a freshman with a math major, what steps would you recommend to take for understanding which subfield one is interested in?
I can come up with an answer at least. So maybe the I guess the first the first thing sort of that I did, at least personally, would be to, you know, as you say, start with subfields of kind of, right now we have maybe finance and tech, at least as the sort of two big fields here. So, you know, you can start there and you know, speak with your professors, especially I think in the applied math department, probably a better bet there, maybe than in the pure math department. But, you know, speak with your professors who might have some, you know, better understanding of different areas of industry. Certainly, you know, just as you're continuing with your coursework, as you're moving through, you know, I would hope that it exposes you to a lot of sort of different ideas that, you know, as you work on different in-class projects, or, you know, read this textbook or that textbook, you know, certain things will jump out at you. The other thing I would maybe say that I personally did is to, and I think again Olga was saying something similar to this, is just to, you know, whenever you start to think that something seems a little bit interesting, you know, then just don't wait for, you know, the next semester when they offer the class on that, or, you know, don't you know, if you think something seems interesting, then, you know, go read a book about it, go, you know, search for a blog post about it somewhere, you know, try your hand at it, you know, look at these different kinds of, you know, there's all sorts of sort of example projects one can find on the internet of people who are doing something interesting with some free data set they found on Kaggle or something like that. I think really the only way to try to figure out what you're interested in is to try a whole bunch of different things, and then as you go, hopefully you'll figure that out. And so I wouldn't worry too much, you know, as a freshman starting out, about, you know, figuring out right away that I want to go work on an options trading desk, you know, that you don't need to worry about that yet, but to just try to expose yourself to as many different things as possible, you know, take a wide variety of classes, have it be something that you're also interested in, not just in your coursework, but maybe out of your coursework as well, you know, in your personal life. Always be looking for new things, always be, you know, reading new things, listening to new podcasts, whatever it is, you know, kind of just trying to expose yourself to new things.
Okay, so one more audience question, then we'll get back to Ajmain's questions, and then I'll get to the rest of the audience questions later. So the last question for now is, how do you recommend going from a non-technical role to a technical role? And in this person's specific example, they're saying they're interested in quantitative finance, but is it necessary to have an engineering background, or can you self-learn language? But I think this is also like a good question for like just the more general case of, you know, going from a non-technical role to a technical role.
So I think in some ways this relates to the last thing that I said. And I think that it's the case that the larger companies are a lot more willing to train you on the job. And so there are plenty of cases where if you can show them that you can think logically and solve these coding problems, and I'm sure if you want examples of the coding problems that people have talked about during interviews, we'll be happy to provide them. But if you can show that you have the ability to think about things in a structured and logical way, then they're willing to take a chance on you, even if you don't have a ton of the required experience, you don't have a million internships, you haven't taken all of the required coursework. So this is a thing that I believe happens more at large companies than at small companies. I will say, though, that in my experience, the first thing that I did was I did a bunch of interviews with startups. Startups seemed like they were expecting me to know more, but also that they were more willing to talk to me if I just reached out to them or sent out an application. And so that gave me a lot of interview experience and also gave me a small internship, which helped. So I think if you're looking for places other than, say, the research labs at Stony Brook to just kind of get your foot in the door, talking to a bunch of startups and maybe offering to do unpaid internship or just an internship for a month or like do whatever interview question they want to ask you. I think that's a very useful way to get experience.
Okay, and so now, unless anyone else wants to input, we'll go back to Ajmain's questions. And again, I'll try to reach the rest of the audience questions later on.
Okay, so before I ask any of these other questions, there was a question I heard from the audience about what is, say, how much training do you get on the job that you currently are at? So Ben did answer this, and he said at Google, mainly you can move around within Google and I guess receive training in whatever you would need to. But what about the other panelists' experience?
I can go stick with the order after Ben. I could maybe just to quickly say that my experience is very similar. It sounds like to Ben's, in that you know, I didn't necessarily have a extremely strong finance background or lots of finance experience whenever I started my job, but the sort of model at Goldman Sachs is very similar in that new hires usually have a few weeks of training where they learn sort of, you know, across all divisions, you know, sort of basic introductory, you know, knowledge that can be sort of applied with anyone, and then you moved to work on your specific team. And there, it's a very much, at least in the team that I work on, an apprenticeship culture where, you know, as you start on a very small little project and you work on that, and whenever you have trouble with it, you go ask someone for some help, and you know, they help you, and then you go and you work on bigger and bigger projects until, you know, you've been there a little while and there's a new person and they come ask you for help and you help them, and then that just kind of continues on.
Okay, I can go next. I would say that at City, in at least like in markets, you get like, I had a month of training that I actually recently just finished before I started. And like, you know, they gave us the basic background because they don't expect everyone to have like a finance major. And then you start on your desk and you're kind of thrown into like an open flame. And like your managers understand that like you don't know everything, but like I started like very recently and all of a sudden they're like, Olga, just do this. And I'm like, all right. And like, I've been turning away, like, in case anyone's noticed, because I broke a piece of technology and I'm not sure how to fix it. But I'll be spending my night trying to fix a piece of technology that I'm not quite sure what is broken. So it's a lot of kind of figuring things out by yourself. Like you have to be very, very patient because it can get very frustrating, and be very good at like not knowing and knowing which questions to ask and when to ask them. So I'd say like that's more of a thing, like if you're going into markets, like into trading and quantitative finance, like research and finance, that is very, like there's very much, at least in my experience, the culture of like you got here and then you have to figure it out for yourself, and there's support and people will answer questions, but you have to be the one that says, I don't know.
So at American Express, it's very highly team dependent. So my team was really small. We were 5. I know that the other sort of more software engineering teams do have sort of like a long sort of training, or I wouldn't say training, but slower period for people who just start, where, you know, they come in with 0 years experience. and they have like prepared sort of tasks to make you do before they hand you off, like to break a website or whatever, or build some API. But on my team, since we were very small and the team was actually also relatively new, what my manager did was he first just gave me sort of like a pet project, said, okay, do this, gave me like a week or two to do it. And then after that was when I started getting more responsibilities or more impactful projects. So I didn't really have any training per se. I just sort of had like, to sort of feel the waters type project. And then that's it.
My experience is probably a little different. I went through, as I mentioned, an 8-month rotational like management development program at my company. So I learned a lot about the company, different departments, more finance business like than on the tech side. And I actually entered my current role right when the whole pandemic was starting up. So I don't know. It was definitely an interesting situation as far as training went when I started, because kind of everyone was figuring out what they were going to do, not really figuring out, okay, how are we going to start getting the new guy onto all the projects right away. So there was maybe a couple of weeks where there was a bit of a lull, but I used that opportunity to brush up on the tech skills that maybe I was a little rusty with. But after about a month, I was put on actually, a fairly high profile project within my company. So it was a lot of learning by doing. My manager was very patient, very understanding, always open to answering questions, but it was very much I was learning a lot on the job and, making mistakes and learning from them too, which turned out to be a really great way to learn.
Okay, thank you so much. So this relates to another question I have. How has COVID affected your field of work as well as your company?
So like pretty much everyone in the tech industry, we're working from home. We've been working from home since March, and we will probably be working from home until something like next June or July. That's subject to change. So there's obvious differences with working from home. Google is already pretty flexible about work schedules, but working from home is even more. If I need to go to the grocery store in the middle of the day, that's totally fine. I think that we probably, like most people, we lost a lot of the camaraderie that you get from being in an office. My work is super, super collaborative. I work with a lot of different people, and it's significantly harder to do that working from home, and you just don't get the enjoyment of talking to your coworkers as much as you used to. So that's certainly a downside. The company as a whole is not too different. We're doing a lot of the same stuff. And then I think probably some of you know that Google treats its employees really well, and they feed us when we're on campus and have a lot of kind of extracurricular activities and gyms and stuff. So definitely missing that part of the job. But day-to-day work is not too different, except the collaboration is harder.
Yeah, probably. I would say in the interest of time, probably a very similar answer. Have been working from home since things began. It sounds like I think a lot of financial services companies are going back into their offices maybe a little bit sooner than some other companies. In particular, there's a lot of regulatory reasons why people might need to be sort of in a physical office. And so I think I think I personally will be going back to work within the next maybe month. It's still a little bit up in the air, but otherwise, I think I would mostly echo the same points.
Okay. I think since we just have 10 more minutes left, let's hear some audience questions, and so let's spend the rest of the time with audience questions.
Do I let the other people answer the COVID question first or no?
Yeah. So if you have anything you want to share about with respect to COVID as well, then please do so.
Okay, so that, all right, you can go.
I guess like the only thing I could add to that is you do learn a lot, like at least in like finance, where it's just the people sitting next to you speaking and like just sharing their ideas and such. So I would say like, especially with me, like being new to the job, I'm definitely losing out on the fact that I would learn a lot just from like my manager speaking to people, like to the other person on my team. So I would say that is the downside, but I should be going back into the office in early October just because I think a lot of the Wall Street banks are trying to get people back to work, as previously mentioned. But I think like just as someone starting out, like that's the biggest downside of being at home.
Okay, so now we'll move to the audience questions. One question that got like 2 people requesting this question is, what is the job market like for those with only a bachelor's degree in math or applied math?
I guess I'll try and chime in. So I had a bachelor's degree in math and physics. I don't really think the double major really helped at all. I certainly, before COVID, got a lot of interviews. I didn't pass all my interviews, but I did get quite a few. So again, it's like personal experience. There are jobs out there, and most of the jobs I applied for were data science related. And I had some previous internships working on related, not exactly data science, but related. And so that certainly helped. I would say that really, if you only have a bachelor's, your internship experience is gonna play a huge role on the number of interviews or callbacks you'll get. So I would suggest that if your plan is to go straight to industry after getting your bachelor's, that you really work for internships while you're still there. I don't think any of my projects that I did on GitHub really helped. It was definitely, everyone wanted to know about what was on my resume as internship experience.
Okay, and now the next question is for Ben specifically. Why did you eventually decide to work at a big company instead of startups?
So this was mostly not my choice. It was mostly where would give me a job. So like I said, I think the startups are looking a lot more for specific skills, and the big companies are a lot more willing to take a chance on someone who they think is smart and they can train. So since I was coming from a background where I didn't have strong internships or stuff like that, a big company was definitely the way to go. And I think what a lot of people do is they'll work for a big company, and then the fact that they have that big company name on their resume signals to startups that they are a good applicant. So then in the future, if they want to move away, they can look for startups a couple years down the road.
Okay, thank you. And now this question is from a little bit earlier on. There's a little bit long of an explanation. So this person says, I'm currently an AMS and ECO double major who is interested in possibly pursuing a career in data science, software development, or software engineering. I'm taking CSE 114 Intro to Java now, and hopefully CSE 214 Data Structures and Algorithms next semester. Would this be sufficient for attaining an internship or entry-level role in these fields? If not, what classes should I take to ensure I'm a strong candidate?
I think I could speak to this a little bit. So I mentioned earlier, I only took I was an AMS economics major at Stony Brook as well. I only took 2 computer science classes, so I could argue you probably have more experience than me as far as, taking classes at Stony Brook in computer science. For internships, I think it's really, once you get your foot in the door, it's being able to, like Ben has said, answering those questions they ask you on the interview, the coding questions, just show, you know, you're able to think through problems, you're able to reason properly. I did some of them and I got the answer wrong, but they were interested in my approach and how I explained it. So just understanding that sort of thing. But I definitely think taking CSE 114 and 214 is enough for attaining an internship. Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is also from a bit earlier, also a bit long. It says, I am a double major in MAT and AMS, but I was really into pure math in the past 2 years, took lots of MAT classes, but now I want to explore more in quantum finance stuff and try to apply for a quantum machine learning intern, but most of them require lots of programming experience and database experience, like SQL, which I don't have. How would you recommend me to start and find a way in this field?
I mean, I guess as someone with a, I guess, somewhat similar background, maybe not exactly, I can answer a little bit just to say that, you know, for some of those aspects, like, you know, specifically if you mention, you know, SQL, like if you need to know some SQL, you know, go find a Coursera course about SQL, and like SQL's for the stuff, you know, I didn't know SQL before I got my job, and, you know, we use it some, and now I know it. And so if you need to know it, you know, take a Coursera course, or, you know, look online and try to do a little project with it, and then put SQL in your resume, and they'll ask you about it, maybe, probably not, but, you know, you should be able to, you know, answer a simple interview question or something like that about it. But, you know, I think that for a lot of these things, having those kinds of formal internships or classes or coursework is very important for getting your foot in the door sometimes. But then after that, as other people have mentioned, it is you know, showing that you have the skills necessary, which, you know, aren't nearly as specific or you know, credentialed often as you might think. So if you need to know SQL, or you need to know something else, you know, go, you know, spend a month or a few weeks or whatever it takes learning about it a little bit, put it on your resume, and then, like, there you go.
Okay, so I think the next question is kind of like the same person might have been repeating their question from earlier, so I won't ask that again. Next is, are freshman students majoring in math able to get internships?
I mean, I will go off the fact that I actually never really had a real paid internship until I was at City for like my junior year internship. I did some like remote like internships for like a small business consulting firm in upstate New York. And that's what I had. I think it's a lot easier probably to find like smaller startups or small businesses to do internships with, especially as a freshman. But you should also definitely look into companies that are willing to take on freshmen for internships. I'll be honest, like after my freshman year of college, I worked at a summer day camp. And then the next summer I was at City. So like, and I did a lot of research on campus to kind of compensate for my lack of internship experience. So it kind of depends on like what you go looking for, and then also kind of what luck you have in finding what you're looking for. But since I kind of struggled getting some internships as a freshman, I just did a lot of research on campus and used that time to develop my skill set in order to be more desirable on the job market.
Okay, we're kind of starting to run out of time, so we're like already over time, I think. So I'm just gonna ask like two more questions on here, and then like, sorry if you had any other questions, but we kind of have to wrap up. So this one says, I'm having a hard time parsing what this means. After graduating with a double major in AMS and Eco and little internship experience, is it better to apply to internships? And then I don't know what TOGA means. It's like 2GA, and then apply for full-time jobs. So like, is it better to apply for internships to GA, and then apply for full-time jobs.
I can give just a very short answer. I know that generally speaking, at least at Goldman Sachs, and I think a lot of the bigger financial companies are similar. Usually internships are for people who are currently are students or will be students the next year or something like that. So I think if I understood the question correctly, if you've already graduated, at least in the finance industry, trying to find a internship is probably not, you probably just don't meet the criteria, in which case I would say apply for jobs. But perhaps I misunderstood.
I can add to a little bit to that. So I know that there exists. I mean, it's significantly harder to get an internship after you graduated, but I know that there exists what some companies will call apprenticeships. I believe Airbnb was running one last year. I don't know if they're doing it again this year, where they'll take someone who usually they're career switchers or whatever, but someone who is maybe just starting off in software engineering or whatever. They're not in school anymore. They've already graduated. And they will pay you a stipend for 6 months and then give you the opportunity to work at the company at the end of it. And I've seen a couple of from other companies, but the big name was Airbnb. So you might want to type into Google apprenticeships or something of the sort, and that might help you out if you've already graduated.
Okay.
So, well, I just want to ask one last question because it looks like a couple people wanted to hear it. Just for students who aren't CS majors, what are your thoughts on self-teaching languages?
So I was self-taught. I taught myself Python. I think it's mostly just you should pick whichever way you think will motivate you to learn the language the best. For me, I really enjoyed doing programming competitions. So I just did a ton of programming competitions, and that's how I learned Python. If you think that you would be better motivated through coursework or through a boot camp or through Kaggle competitions or something, you should pick that. I would probably worry less about grades or credentialing and just pick the thing that you feel like will be fun and motivating and will get you to practice the language a lot.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for participating in this panel. All the panelists, thank you so much for participating.